Welcome. In this edition of The Writing of God, we caught up with an old friend, Tim Mahoney, the documentary filmmaker of the Patterns of Evidence. I have known Tim for like 20 years, and we have consulted on the film, and we talked about his continuing saga of the Exodus, the conquest of the Promised Land, and also the state of America and Revelation and how it fits into all of this. A very exciting interview, and let's get to it right now.
Join ancient language linguist, author, educator, and biblical archaeologist, Dr. Miles Jones, as he explores the writing of God.
Welcome. We are here with the actually famous by now documentary filmmaker, the creator of the Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus, Tim Mahoney.
Well, hello, Miles, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. And I don't know about famous, but
infamous, maybe.
There you go. I'm trying to be famous to my kids and grandkids, so in the sense of loving them. And but yeah, working on these projects, I remember we've known each other for probably
I knew you before you were infamous.
Yeah,
and it was always an inspiration. You always prayed over every project and every person in the project. And we were engaged in the filming for the Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus.
Right.
So it's always been wonderful watching and seeing these films get a grip on the public. You know, they're really beautifully done. So I've just enjoyed the product of the work that you are doing. And in fact, I remember it was at one of the events that we had at Mahoney Media when Dr. Kim was there with the oldest artifact in the world with the name of God written on Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Yeah.
And which I translated. Yep. And it was just wonderful to hold that in my hands and explain to the people that had gathered to hear about it, you know, the importance of it. Because to them, I have actually heard broadcasters, say, that'd make a nice paperweight. And I'm like, wow, you really want to talk about the name of God that way? So it's just been an amazing thing that you have brought some of the most important evidence of the truth of the Bible to the public mind. It's just a wonderful accomplishment.
Well, I think that the Bible is our foundation for everything. That's so real that it is. And my family believe that. My mother and I attribute a lot to my mother and grandmother, because they were the two big influences when it comes to prayer. And it came to the Bible. My grandmother carried a Bible around, and so did my mother. But my grandmother, I remember carrying it. It was almost like falling apart, but it had been marked all up. And my mother also studied the Bible. And when I was filming the Exodus film, I had a very powerful experience where, after I came back from Egypt, I was sitting in the edit suite, and I was looking at the footage, trying to understand why there wasn't any evidence when I was doing the interview with Manfred Bietek. And
Manfred Bietek, by the way, did the excavations at Goshen and established the presence of Canaanites, of Hebrews living in Goshen during the time of the Exodus, and then disappearing all at once.
Right,
sorry, go on.
Exactly, and so I went to talk to him. I mean, it wasn't easy to get there. I went to that location, sometimes had to lay on the floor of the vehicle and hide and get through all the areas. I thought it was okay to go there, but apparently it wasn't at the time. And for our own safety, we managed to get through all that, and we got there. And I asked him, have you found evidence of the Israelites? And he said, so far, not. And that impacted me so much. In fact, I almost was like, got hit in the head with a 2x4. I could almost hear a bell ringing. It had such a power because I had traveled to the other side of the world to talk to a man who should know.
Yes.
I didn't know at the time. And was that he had to be very careful what he said, because he was digging in a Muslim nation, and there were people that did not want a history to the nation of Israel.
Right.
But I didn't know that at the time. So he had to be very cautious and didn't want to go on camera saying things like that. So I came back and had a crisis of faith. And I think for a lot of people, you might have something that comes into your life that causes you to doubt God's word.
Yes.
You know, and might be a suffering of a family member or something. And I sat in my edit suite, looked at this footage, and I started to cry. I said, Lord, you have to help me. And as I said that, I felt the temperature of the room change. It was like a cold feeling came in. And this thought entered my mind: everything your family has believed about the Bible is a lie. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had fallen into a pit, a dark despair. It was the most horrible thought that ever came to my life. Hopelessness. And then then this other voice on this side of me, well, one was on this side and one was on this side, said, stop editing, get up, go to your office. So I got up, walked to my office, go to the bookcase, walked over to the bookcase, read that book. I looked and there I saw it was David Roll's book on pharaohs and kings.
Really?
And I opened the book up and I opened it to a place almost in the center of the book where it's talking about Manfred Betek's dig site. And it was all the evidence for Joseph and that, the death of, the plague of death that came, the 10th plague and all of that.
Well, he found Joseph's tomb.
Yeah, Joseph's tomb. It was all there. And I said, I have to go to England. And that began the Patterns of Evidence journey. I think that started in, probably in the fall, spring, it was the fall of 2002. And so it took 12 years to make that first film. And then, we met Jim and Penny Caldwell, and we met Dr. Kim, and I met you. And we started understanding so I made that first film, The Exodus, and then later on, The Moses Controversy, because I knew the alphabet was important. That they were trying to disassociate the early writing of the Bible with the early Proto-Sinaitic, inscriptions.
Alphabet, yeah.
But I think we built a really solid case that this, other than this is, I believe, the location, of where the alphabet came from. And these are the people who created the alphabet. And why is that important? It says, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
We were talking about that just earlier.
Yeah.
It had to be. He called the universe into creation by saying the Word.
So God's Word, and the Israelites were supposed to be, slaves. So how in the world would these illiterate people be able to do things like write these commands on your doorpost, teach them to your children?
No, exactly.
Well,
and it says that directly. They're commanded to do that, to read them, to write them.
Yeah. So anyway, that became the second film. And eventually then I went on to make films on the Red Sea Miracle, and we looked at miracles, and then the Journey to Mount Sinai, which was 2 films. And so here we are. I have continued to make them. I'm working on another film now called, I have 3 films on the Israelites coming into the land.
That's wonderful. So you're finally going to get there to Mount Sinai.
Well, I got past Mount Sinai. Now I'm moving into the Promised Land. And then we had October, was it the 7th or 9th?
Yeah, the 7th.
Yeah, and that's when we know a tragedy happened. And I decided it was time to shift the type of film that I would make. And this film is called The Israel Dilemma. And it's going to show this event that happened at Mount Sinai was that there was a covenant that was made. And that God said that he would, if they kept the covenant, they would keep the land. The land and the land was connected to the people. But if they disobeyed and broke the covenant with God, he would destroy them as a nation. That's part of the pattern. He would scatter them through the land.
Into slavehood.
Yep. They would be persecuted. He would destroy them as a nation. He would be shut out of the nation. They would be persecuted. They would eventually come back to the land as well. And
those that remain, you destroy those by sword, famine, and pestilence first, and the ones that remain would be exiled. He's no Pennywise, is he?
Right.
I mean, he can hit hard when he chooses to.
It's just incredible. And so I wanted to go and see, could we find that in history?
Yeah.
So now we see that it's happened twice. It happened once with Babylon. It's a smaller degree because they didn't get spread all the way they were before, but now they've been spread across the nations. And 2,000 years later, they come back together in 1948. So we're looking at this big, can we find evidence of this covenant?
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. So glad you're continuing on. I know I encouraged you to do that, but I think there's another part to the story about Manfred Betek, isn't there?
Right. I ended up being in Jerusalem and about 10 years later, and I heard when I was doing the inscriptions, I think it's Goldwasser.
Yeah, Orly Goldwasser.
Yeah,
Right.
she said, my boyfriend's interested and has new information about the Exodus and about the Israelites. And I was like, oh, wow, Manfred Bitek wants to talk. And so we met, and he shared evidence of the Israelites in Egypt and Lake Geshem. So what you don't really realize is that, according to him, that when they settled in this land, they actually had lakeshore property. It was, it was beautiful, and it was a beautiful place for them.
When he settled in Egypt.
Yes, when they settled into Egypt. Yeah. So he came back and said, we shouldn't discount the Bible. And I said, it's so crazy. But what happened when I first met you, and now we come back a decade later, and he starts telling me that there is evidence for the Bible. So
is evidence of the Israelites in Goshen.
Right.
And, and like I said, and his evidence was that they disappeared all at once overnight.
Yeah.
Well, imagine that.
So, well, I think that I've got more to tell you. I'm not sure if should we continue it in this episode, or you keep going? Okay.
Keep going.
Well, what's happened since then is that I am working on something called Bible Cinema Roadshow. And Bible Cinema Roadshow, you go, where did that come from? Well, when I was in Cairo in 2002, we were praying, and went up to the top with Leonard Moeller of the hotel. And as we prayed, I had a strong one word, kept roadshow. I was like, where did that come from? And but I think it's very important for all of us, when God says something to us in our life, it's easy to get distracted. And I don't know if you've ever asked someone, like a child, to go do something, and then they see a butterfly or whatever, and they get distracted. Well, we're like that oftentimes too. The Lord tell us something at a conference or reading scripture, and then he's trying to get our attention, and then we go off. Well, I did not want to forget the roadshow. And I ended up going later on, when I got the films done. I went to Branson, and I went to other cities, and I had events. But I'm continuing now. I think we can talk about that in the future.
Hold on for 1 second, because we want to hear about this. This is a wonderful new development, and we will be back with the infamous Tim Mahoney in just 1 minute. Don't touch that dial.
The writing of God will continue in just a moment.
What difference does it make whether the Hebrew book of Revelation was written in Hebrew or Greek? Well, we have the Greek copies, but it was originally written in Hebrew. And if you want to understand the Hebrew perspective as put forth in the words of Yehovah and his son Yeshua, you need to read it from the Hebrew book of Revelation. I am the Aleph Tav. Revelation 1:8, the first and the last, says Yehovah Elohim, who is, who was, who will be, the Almighty. The words of the Lord himself and his son, who narrates the book of Revelation. We now know what their real names are, for example. They are Yehovah with the correct vowel pointing, and Yeshua HaMashiach. All that documentation is in this book. Get yours now, the Hebrew book of Revelation, at writingofgod.com. Yehovah puts lights in the firmament of the heavens to record warnings and Moedim, appointed times for his people and him. And it speaks to us throughout the day and the night. They're constantly transmitting information to us. What does that mean? Well, we will tell you about it in our latest series of video lessons about the Moedim and the book Moedim. Go together in a bundle along with the Hebrew Gospel of Revelation, the Hebrew book of Revelation, which certainly talks about celestial events for the end times. All of these things in one bundle, from Jonah's eclipse when he was sent to Nineveh to implore those people to repent, and they did, saving themselves from destruction, to the celestial events at Yeshua's crucifixion, to Christopher Columbus, who was saved from the natives, angry natives, by a lunar eclipse, a blood moon. So we'll talk about the blood moons, we'll talk about the eclipses, we'll talk about how these things are used to establish the correct biblical timeline of ancient history. So go to writingofgod.com right now to get your copy.
Online at thewritingofgod.com. That's online at thewritingofgod.com.
We're back with Tim Mahoney, and he's going to tell us about Bible Cinema Roadshow, which sounds very exciting.
Bible Cinema Roadshow is an effort to basically have the Bible in your community. And as I mentioned, I was in Egypt, and this idea for Roadshow, I've been praying about it for over 20 years, trying to understand what does that mean and how should it come about. And one of the things that we know is that we still have an opportunity to put the Bible-oriented films in our community, and we're very thankful for that. So Bible Cinema Roadshow, we've got a film coming, actually it's a two-part film on the 7 churches of Revelation. Someone in France, Christophe Hanover, was very interested in what I did with the Patterns of Evidence, and so he decided to do something in French, and he went to the 7 churches and investigated the locations and the archaeology, and then he told what the situation was politically and religiously at the sites, what the pressure was. The early Christians, the early church, were in many cases a city had a god, and if they did not worship that god, you were considered possibly causing a curse on the city.
Right.
And so Christians were not just, hey, you could just do your own thing. They're like, hey, if we don't get rain for the crops, it's because of those people aren't worshiping our God. And so you don't realize the conflict between becoming a believer and living in your city. And so
especially Pergamon,
yes,
which was the throne of Satan.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not an abstraction. They actually had an altar there, an altar to Satan. It was, of course, originally Greek, and they did Greek ritual there, but it was actually taken up by Hitler. I mean, it was moved to Berlin.
Yeah.
And then Stalin took it after World War II, and they killed millions of citizens. You know, you should be wary of keeping the throne of Satan in your house, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
A very good lesson there.
Yes, and you're going to see the location. You're going to actually in this film, we're going to go to the island of Patmos and show the cave where they think that John received the vision, and we're going to go then to each of the locations, to Ephesus and to Smyrna and Pergamon, and that's so the first 3 churches are in the first film, and that's going to coming out on March. It is 10th and 11th. So on March 10th and 11th, you're going to be able to see and go to where these early churches were. And what's interesting is that the church of Smyrna, as an example, they were faithful. And the leader there, I believe, he was killed. I'm not sure if he was burned to death or exactly how it happened, but...
Is this Antipas we're talking about?
I'm trying to think of his name at the moment. I can't, but he was an early church father.
Faithful servant Antipas.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is that you're going to understand the context, and I think it's been very helpful. Instead of trying to say, a lot of people want to know what the future holds, I think the better thing is, how can I prepare to be faithful to the Lord as I go into the future? So these films are going to show you where the archaeology happened, what's there, what they look like, and what the church was facing. And then you're going to hear the message of what they were faithful in and what they weren't faithful in. And like, for example, the church of Ephesus, the message was, I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know you cannot tolerate wicked people. And goes on. It sounds pretty good. Then it says, but, I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. You've forsaken your first love. And so the question is, as I looked at bringing these films into theaters, so the first film is Times of Fire. It's going to be an emphasis on persecution. The second film is coming on March 17th and 18th, and that's going to be an emphasis on compromise or deception, the churches that are compromising or being deceived. Now that happened, 20 centuries ago, right?
Right.
Is it any different? So what we start to see is there are churches that are compromising, there are Christians that are compromising their faith. And so that's the reason why I think that these two films are to prepare our hearts to say, Lord, am I living the way I need to? Am I and hear what the messages are to those other churches? Because every century, I think, believed that Christ was coming back.
Yes.
Every century. And so the message that to the seven churches, I think, has been appropriate for every century, and it's very appropriate for today.
That's for sure. There were different sort of archetypal problems the churches were dealing with.
Yeah.
These were all churches that John had possibly started or certainly deeply involved with. So we've just been translating it from the Hebrew. And
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm very
amazing.
familiar with
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I've got to learn more about what you're up to, because it does seem that there are people like yourself that have taken and just felt a real calling to dig into something that no one else is interested in. For me, I actually, 12 years working on the same thing, 12 years. Sometimes doctors can go from, get their, become a doctor. Well, I'm not a doctor. I know you are. But it just was a long process. And I really wanted to just continue to get it done. So so people know, if they want to go to see these films,
You are branching out too.
yes, I am branching out.
You've got the Revelation movies, 2 parts, right?
Yes, 2 parts. Yep.
Which is excellent. A lot of that needs to be done. And you've also are doing the American Miracle.
I am. But before I tell you a little bit about that, let me just say this. If you want to get tickets, you can go to Bible Cinema Roadshow Films, BibleCinemaRoadshowFilms.com, and you can bring family, friends, Bible study group, small group, Sunday school group, and come to see that movie. And yes, this
Now,
past
will they
year,
be playing in like local cinemas?
we have
that sort of
400,
thing?
400 cinemas that are, you can see if your cinema is there,
Yeah.
but there'll be 400 cinemas across the country. And there's a panel discussion at the end. We filmed the first one at the Museum of the Bible.
Yes, that's great.
And so that's going to be the big event that we're talking about. That's kind of what got us together. But yes, I am also working on something called The American Miracle. A friend of ours, Michael Medved, wrote a book called The American Miracle. And he wrote another one, God's Providential Hand on America. Michael is Jewish and Orthodox, and he wanted to tell his family about America. And so he started telling his father, his family came out of the Holocaust. I mean, they went through, they lived in Ukraine, I believe it was, and they came out of an awful lot of suffering. And they came to America, and his father wanted to teach Michael about America, and they grew up in Philadelphia. So he took him to see the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall, and took him around and just told him, this is the greatest nation. And right now we have people that are attacking our nation. People that are in colleges are saying this is an evil place and the founders were evil people. There's a whole nother story that needs to be told, and that's what the American Miracle Film Project is about. Our nation is no accident. We're going to see, just like the Israelites had a coming out we had a coming out. There were supernatural events. So we are telling the supernatural events that happened through weather, that happened through bullets that were shot at Washington as a young man they went through his clothing, but they never went through him. There was an Indian prophecy that we're going to show. True, with witnesses that said, we tried to kill you and we realized that we couldn't kill you. And then they came back and said, we know that you will be a leader of a great nation.
Wow.
So these types of things, we need to hear these stories. We need to hear these stories again.
And there's a lesson so fundamental here. America has been the biggest supporter of Israel. And we have become the most prosperous, most powerful nation in the world because we followed the Abrahamic blessing. Whoever blesses you, I shall bless. And whoever curses you, the chosen people, I shall curse.
Yeah.
So we're on that tightrope now because we're turning against Israel in many cases.
Yeah.
And that will be the end of it, the end of the God's blessing on this country. If we do that, it's a warning.
That's why this next film, I'm praying that I can get finished soon, The Israel Dilemma.
Yes.
Is that it's not just about Israel and the dilemma. The world is in a dilemma. America is in a dilemma. How are we going to support Israel? How are we going to react to this?
Right.
Because we will be judged accordingly.
We will be. We'll be judged by the Almighty, which is the important thing. So we're looking forward to this one. The Israel Dilemma is what you're calling that one.
Yeah.
The American Miracle, and the fire.
The Seven Churches of Revelation,
Seven
which is
Churches
going to
of
be in
Revelation.
theaters. Yeah.
You are a busy man, and we'll be looking forward to your coming works. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Miles. God bless
You bet.
you. Yep.
You too. And we'll be back with you in a minute. What is the Revelation of the Month Club? Well, let me tell you, the Hebrew Gospels are the most important biblical discovery since the Dead Sea Scrolls. It took 40 years for scholars to get those published and out to the public. If you're graduating high school, getting your first job, you would be in retirement before all the Dead Sea Scrolls were published. We cannot let that happen with the Hebrew Gospels. But to get them out there, we need your help. That's what the Revelation of the Month Club does. We translate these manuscripts. I was called to go and find the manuscripts of the Hebrew Gospels. At the time, some more than a decade ago, everyone was saying they don't exist. They never existed. We found dozens of the manuscripts, and now we have acquired them. I went to Israel, England, France, Spain, Italy, and now we have members all over the world searching out these manuscripts and getting them for us. And now, as a result of our work, they are starting to be translated. And we don't want you to have to wait. We want to send you chapters of the Hebrew Gospels as soon as they are translated. We want to bring it to your door. For a monthly donation, we will bring these into your home because you're the ones that are making it happen. So we want you to get a first look at everything. These are priceless manuscripts. We've spent untold $1,000 getting them. And the price of doing this and bringing this message to you on video is costly. So with your support, we can make this happen. So go to writingofgod.com right now and become a subscriber to the Revelation of the Month Club and find the Hebrew Gospels in your inbox tomorrow. That was a really important interview with Tim Mahoney. I'm looking forward to the new films that are going to chronicle the entrance into the Promised Land. We've got some great things for you. We're just coming out with an edition of Hebrew Book of Revelation. These manuscripts have only been recovered in the past few years, and we've been working overtime to translate and get this compilation to you. We also are coming out with a book, Moedim, the celestial events in heaven, what Yehovah is trying to tell us. This is the information you need to understand the warnings that are coming to us from the heavens in this day and time. Don't miss another episode of The Writing of God.
Send your gift to The Writing of God, P.O. Box 294027, Kerrville, Texas 78029, or online at thewritingofgod.com. That's online at thewritingofgod.com.